All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Triaxle podcast. I am here today with Philip Sessions out of Greenville, South Carolina. Philip is a young man who is passionate about speaking and public speaking, more particularly, as well as communication. Philip works for BMW full-time currently, but his passion is in the public speaking arena. It's what he loves to do, and he has made a business of it, and he is transitioning himself into making that his full-time gig. So, Philip, welcome to the podcast. Glad to have you on, man.
Hey, Matt, glad to be here, man. And you said Greenville wrong. It's Greenville, South Carolina. We just slur that all together down here in the South.
I have a Scranton NEPA accent, so I can't do the Southern accent very well. So I appreciate the connection. So awesome to have you on, man.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
So we're kind of mixing it up today. This is a little bit different for our listeners and for our guests. We're here to talk about communication. I mean, communication is important in any business, but in the construction world and the dirt world, which is the majority of our listeners here, communication is key. It means going home at the end of the day or not. It means running an efficient and effective business or one that's just disorganized chaos. So I think it's great. We're kind of mixing it up here a little bit and kind of pivoting to a different type of guest here. So we're going to obviously learn a little bit more about your business and how you got into it. But I think the connection between what you do and how you could possibly help some of our listeners and our followers could be key here. So to kick it off, how did you get into the speaking arena? I know it's something that a lot of people stray away from or run away from. They're very fearful from or for. How did you go from being a shy, quiet kid to one that, is now teaching people how to do what you do?
Man, I'll try and keep this short. It really started back in third grade where I was just a shy kid, so shy that, in fact, I missed a day of school and came back the next day, and my teacher had no clue that I missed because I asked her, hey, what did I miss? No clue that I was there. She's like, oh, you missed? I didn't notice. And that kind of lingered with me throughout all of my schooling, like high school, up to high school. And then finally college, I decided I was going to make a change. I was going to start getting into fitness. I was going to be more attractive to women, to hopefully land dates and all of this stuff. And that kind of worked out, kind of didn't work out. And then I'm trying to go through this a little quick, but then I got into my corporate career and realized that I was still getting passed over. Like I was finally at the point where women kind of paid me attention. My peers kind of paid me attention, but management didn't pay me any attention. And in fact, I got put down a lot because I have a degree in electrical engineering. And so I was always the young, dumb engineer out there, even though I was the one doing all the work, making everything happen. And finally, back in 2016, I was in oil and gas. And I was that young, dumb engineer still, quote unquote, young and dumb. But we would go into these engineering meetings, and I was with some guys that had been engineers for 40 and 50 years. And the manager would put me down because we go into a meeting. I would talk for 50 minutes of the hour meeting every single week about status updates on my projects. And then the other 10 minutes were for the other like 3 or 4 engineers for them to talk about their projects. So clearly you could see there was a big difference between the workload I had and the workload they had. But my manager, with all his wisdom, told me, because I was working about 40 to 45 hours a week on salary. You don't get paid for more than 40. So who wants to work more than that? He told me one day, because I made a comment about, well, I hadn't gotten to this project yet because I'm working on these others and I just don't have the time and all this stuff. And he told me, well, if you don't have time, maybe you need to work some more hours. I see you come in right at 7, you leave right about 3. Maybe you need to work some more hours. And there was some other things that happened there where he just kind of kept putting me down. And I just started feeling like such a small person, like smaller and smaller, until finally one day I was just tired of it. And I finally just said, you know what? I need to make this change. And I realized what the change was the fact that he and other managers I've had in the past would talk over me. They would talk down to me. And I would never stand up for myself by speaking up. And so I wanted to make that change. And then combined with going to these mastermind events, these conferences, these business conferences and stuff, and seeing these amazing speakers be able to get up there and speak to thousands or tens of thousands of people and make lives change, create all sorts of impact within an hour. And so I wanted to empower myself, but I wanted to create impact beyond just being an engineer. And so that's really where all this started for me. So 2016 to 2018 was a lot of self-development, a lot of self-discovery and everything, and really pushing myself to get outside of my comfort zone and start speaking up for myself and really end up speaking up for others as well. And from there, started a podcast, started doing video content pretty much daily at that point, started speaking on stages here and there, not as much as I would like to, started doing podcast interviews, being on other people's podcasts, and just putting myself out there, running my own events locally, things of that nature. So any opportunity I could speak, I would do that because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't overlooked anymore. I got tired of being overlooked. I got tired of being talked down to. And so that's really where that journey started out for me, was just finally pretty much being tired of being put down, and I wanted to make a change.
So in doing that, you just basically just put yourself out there and got yourself out of your comfort zone and forced yourself to do everything that you just said.
Yeah. And I wanted to be so undeniably true that like Philip puts himself out there. Philip has all of this stuff out there. He is who he is. That's who he is. Like, you're not going to be like, well, you know, that's Philip over here, but over here he's somebody different. No, like, I'm Philip on video. I'm Philip in person. I'm this same person. And because of me putting myself out there, I've had people look up to me and respect me. And I've been able to get myself into positions and do different projects and lead different teams and everything, because I was willing to put myself out there instead of just being that guy that was kind of just doing the work and sitting behind the scenes and being put down and trying to be the nice guy. I started standing up for myself, and that made that huge change for me in my life.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. And I like your shirt. What does it say? Freedom of speech.
It says free speech, more important than your feelings.
Yeah, and that
So we were talking about branding. That's my branded shirt.
Yeah, free speech is more important than your feelings, and that couldn't, that is true. And I think a lot of people and a lot of organizations forget that these days, because there's a lot of tiptoeing around this person's feelings or that person's feelings, and I think sometimes like the message gets lost, and the true meaning of what you're trying to do gets watered down, because you're trying to, and a lot of times, especially like in public arena or governmental type stuff, or like some of these bigger organizations, it's a big thing these days, whether for better or for worse. Everybody's trying to make sure that this person's not offended or that person's not offended. So you have to be always respectful of everybody around you. But I feel like a lot of times certain things aren't said to kind of just, get straight to the point, because you're stuck doing the politically correct thing or making sure that somebody's not going to be offended by what you're talking about. So I like your shirt.
Yeah. Thanks, man. And you're right. That whole political correctness, that is really detrimental to our communication. And there are certain instances where, you do need to be cognizant of people and their backgrounds and all that stuff. And that's a part of communication. But just to be politically correct, you don't say something, to me, that does a disservice. And so there needs to be a happy medium between this. And I think it's really just being about very direct with what you mean, and picking up the phone and having a conversation, or meeting person to person. Too many times we want to sit here, I'm going to send an email out, or I'm going to send a text, especially the younger generation. No, let's get on a phone call at a minimum, but let's get in person so we can really see the emotions. We can hear the emotions. We can feel the emotion in the room and immediately get a response to how the person is reacting to that. Because it's easy to send an email and be like, I can't stand your guts. You're really fat. Don't call me again. Like, that's really easy. But then when I say it in person, and all of a sudden, like, either you want to punch me back or you start saying something back immediately, it's like, oh, well, maybe I won't say that next time because that's a little messed up.
Yeah.
Or, you're going to have a consequence immediately, but then it also immediately gets resolved. Is like, oh, that was actually a little harsh. I probably shouldn't have said that. And so you can come back and apologize, like, hey, I didn't mean it that way or whatever. And you can resolve that conflict a lot quicker. But trying to be politically correct and write these in emails and not have all the context behind it with the emotions and all of that, everything gets skewed. And so it depends on the severity of which the conversation is. Like, can this be escalated? Can a lot of emotions arise very quickly from it? It's probably better to have an in-person or a minimum a phone conversation versus an email or a text and everything. And just that whole political correctness, I think, especially in the South, here in the Southern United States, being direct is often considered rude, which I understand where that kind of can come from, because it's like, oh, wow, like you just told me exactly what you were thinking. Like, wow. I mean, it was just direct. But that to me is the ultimate sign of kindness, because rather than trying to tiptoe around your feelings, I'm just going to say, here's the facts. Here's what I think. And be very direct with you about how this made me feel or whatever is going on right now, rather than trying to tiptoe around emotions, around trying to say it without saying it directly. Like, directness is, to me, the best way to go at all times, or almost all the time. Of course, there's those emotional things that maybe you miss out because you're direct, but directness to me is probably one of the better ways and approaches to communication.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And I'm going to, keep pivoting this back to our listener, who is, the younger generation, I think is a big core like a big group of ours. But in this industry, and even in business and in life in general, I find more and more people don't want to have those hard conversations. Nobody wants to have a hard conversation. I never enjoyed taking somebody aside and saying, hey, you're fired, or hey, you really screwed up bad and there's consequences, or, going to a customer and saying, hey, we failed you in this regard, or whatever happened. But you always, like, just getting the conversation, having the conversation, whether it's in phone or in person, the result is always that much better when it's over. And where you stand after that. I can think of one instance, I think it was last year. My brother Doug and I were texting back and forth, and he got a little upset with me or pissed off, and me with him. And we jumped on the phone the next morning and we sorted it out instantly. And we realized, even though we're brothers, we've known each other for 40 some years, and we know how to handle each other and talk to each other. We lost communication and the meaning of what we were trying to say in that text, back and forth that night. And we both got a little fired up over it. And we jumped on a call the next morning and we're like, oh, you're not an asshole. No, you're not being an idiot. Like, that's just, oh, okay, cool. Like, we're good. And it just kind of showed us, like, hey, listen, anytime like we actually have to really go over something important, or that, that's detrimental to what we're doing, like, we have to talk in person. And I think that was a good lesson for us early on. And it should be a good lesson to our listeners. Hard conversations, they're hard for a reason. It means, there's something going on there that affects your life, affects the life of the person that you're talking to, or the career, or their day, or whatever it might be. But more often than not, you get so much more done through real, communication, live, in person. People quit these days through text message. They'll just, I mean, the list just goes on, and you hear it, all the time. Somebody will work a job for a couple of years and they just won't show up one day and say, I quit. And they didn't have the guts to come in and talk to their boss and have the conversation and explain why they were doing it. They just, a lot of people kind of just hide behind the keyboard these days, which is, it's not good for any business. It's not good for society. It's not good for just communicating as humans. I feel like, some of these people you see walking around, like you'll just be in a store or getting your hair cut, and these younger people, or anybody, just walks in, and you can tell they just don't know how to talk to other human beings because they're not forced to. They're able to hide behind a screen or a keyboard, and it's very hard for them. And I think it's going to be detrimental to us as a society going forward if we continue to try to, connect with people through a keyboard or through a text message.
Yeah, exactly. And really, the emails or text messages, that should be information only. And this is one thing that I see small business owners don't get right is that when they have a conversation, a change order happens out in the field, or they need to do an escalation. Hey, some new initiative, if you will, or hey, this is the direction we're going. This going back to what you talked about with safety. When we're communicating safety, yes, we need to talk in person, but afterwards, you need to send an email to say, hey, we talked about this in our safety communication today, XYZ. That way it's there. There's a paper trail there because, and I'm sure you have countless stories you can share on this, and I can share several stories as well where I've had a conversation with somebody and then a day later, they're saying the complete opposite of what was agreed upon in the conversation because they remember it differently. Why sometimes this happens and how people somehow misinterpret completely how something was said is beyond me. But when you're having these meetings, whether they're in person or online or over the phone, it's always good to follow up with an email. Well, sometimes we call these meeting minutes. And so after the meeting, you said, hey, Matt, this is what we talked about based on the conversation we had. XYZ was the outcome, and this is how we're going to move forward. And you basically just give her a little summary of what it is that you talked about. And now it's there in writing. And make sure to do this in email because it holds up a lot better than a text message, although a text message kind of can apply. But I would definitely do an email because then now you have a paper trail to go back and say, no, Matt, we talked about this. I sent you a follow-up email saying XYZ, and you didn't respond at all to say, no, that's not going to work, or no, that's not what we agreed to, and then us to be able to have another conversation on it. Because now I've got more documentation than you do. It's your word versus my word and my document I sent. So who's gonna hold up a little bit better? And this is not to go to the legal system, court, or anything like that. But when it comes down to who's going to win the argument, the one with the most documentation most likely will. And not to make it that it's like we want to make sure we're winning every argument, but it's just to make sure that we are clear and on the same page. And so really email and text message is all about information sharing, factual things, and not necessarily emotional conversations or having a back and forth. It's so hard to have a back and forth in those right now. And it's something that you can put off to the side. So that's why you want to go in and have that phone conversation or have that in-person conversation and be able to get basically all the back and forth out of the way. And then you can follow up with an email or text message saying, hey, here's what we talked about in the decision we made.
Sure. Absolutely. And I agree. I think as much, face to face or, verbal communication that can happen really just sorts through hours of endless email trails back and forth. But it is extremely important to follow up when necessary with an email for documentation. One thing that, we deal with a lot in the construction industry is change orders. You get into a big project, let's say it's a year-long project. It's very easy for many change orders to be proposed or happen throughout that time. So, month one, month two, the owner, the customer, the property owner agrees and says, yes, oh yeah, I would like you to do that. Put this, put that extra swale in, or yes, add this section of driveway, whatever it might be. But then as you get to the end, people start forgetting about these things. And then, so at least that way you have something to go back and reference. So I think it's like a double-edged sword. We're here to talk, we're talking communication, and it's important to have human interaction and make sure people are talking and getting their message across. But in this day and age, especially, you do need to kind of document some of the stuff and follow up to make sure your butt's covered as well.
Yeah, exactly. Especially those change orders. I can't tell you how many times I've been on projects where you go in and all of a sudden the customer wants another thing and another thing and another thing. You're like, all right, well, there's some things where like, hey, we'll go ahead and do a little bit here. We'll give and take a little bit. But some things it's just going to cost the company too much. And you can't do that. Or now because, okay, well, we can add that. But then, well, we need to extend the timeline as well. Like it's no problem adding that, but that's going to take us an extra 3 days. Well, this was let's just call it a 1 week project and we need another 3 days. well, you told me you were going to finish this in a week. Now it's going to take you 10 days instead of 7. Like what? Well, yeah. And that's where that has to come into writing and talk about that. But the really having that in-person communication too. Well, hey, Miss Sally, we are happy to go ahead and do this for you, but that's going to take an additional 3 days. So I know we said we would be done by Saturday, but because of the additional 3 days, we won't be done until Wednesday. Because let's say you don't work on Sundays, so we'll be done on Wednesday. Is that going to be okay? Oh well, that change will cost an extra $10,000. Is that something that it will be okay with you? Like having those conversations like that, being very direct instead of yeah, we can take care of that, and then all of a sudden at the end of the project, oh, here's your bill for an extra $10,000. Wait, what? You just said you were going to take care of it.
Sure. Yeah.
And most people know things aren't free, but they don't know what it's going to cost either. So sometimes where it seems like a simple thing, and that's because you're an expert in the business, you know how much it takes. A lot of people don't know what that really takes to make that happen. One little change, while it seems like, oh, it's just a little change, you've got 10 or 20 steps that you have to do in order to make that little change happen. So being able to explain that, especially for your guys that are on the site, to explain those things and be able to kind of give a little pushback, if you will, to the client to say, happy to do that. Let us get an estimate for you because of XYZ reasons, and kind of communicating some of that. And we can get back to you on that is a good thing to have. And I think a lot of leaders miss out on that opportunity with their team to allow those guys out in the site to be able to have that information and that understanding of what a project takes and small changes take and how that can impact a project overall. And not to mention now you've got a crew here, and then you were expecting them to be over here at the end of that project, but now you've added an extra 3 days. Well, how do you go make up for that 3 days on another project too? Like you don't just magically have a third crew or anything like that. So there's all sorts of stuff behind the scenes that needs to kind of be talked about and have a good, I guess, understanding for all parties, if you will. And that comes down to communication.
Right. And I think if you look at some of the most well-run, well-organized companies out there, whether they're in the blue-collar industry, in the construction dirt world, or some of these Fortune 500 companies, if you really, took a deep dive into them and looked at them, you would find that they have good internal communication, good external communication out to their customers, their vendors, the other people that they work with. I mean, it can't be stressed enough, how important it is. I mean, in this business, it could mean life or death. It's safety, knowing what the hazards are on the job site. A lot of the companies out there that have very good employee, retention and, are a desired company to work for. I think they're the ones that are probably out there in the morning. They're having that morning meeting. They're having that safety talk or that toolbox talk, and they're talking about the hazards for the day. Hey, over the weekend we had this hazard come up on the site. It wasn't there on Friday, but it's there today. So you need to make sure. So I think obviously that that's key in so many regards. In your line of work, though, along with communication, you are teaching people how to speak in front of other people, how to gain the confidence, and how to actually stand up and communicate what they need to a group of people. Now, for many of us, for me, I can do that one-on-one or in a small group setting, but you put me up in front of 50 or 100 or 500 people, it's a whole different ballgame. I start sweating. I get a little nervous. So how have you gone from not only being the shy kid to get yourself over this hurdle, but how are you now teaching other people? Because I feel a lot of our users can benefit from this. I think there's companies out there that have, the president or the CEO is required to get in front of the team of employees on a weekly or a monthly basis. And there's a difference between, doing that confidently and effectively versus just whizzing through it to kind of do your part. So tell me a little bit about, making that transition for yourself and how you gained enough confidence that now you can do that and teach other people.
I realized that people want to be led. It seems kind of bizarre, but people want to be led and given direction. And most people are willing to listen to you as long as you care. So if you're that CEO right now and now you've got to start telling all these safety initiatives, which let's face it, nobody likes to hear about safety. Safety's boring, but safety also saves lives. But if you go in there and you're not wearing your safety glasses, your hard hat, your safety boots, all of your PPE, and you're talking about safety, nobody's going to want to listen to you because, like, oh, well, yeah, the CEO's here, cool, but he's in his 3-piece suit. He's not getting out here working with us. And you don't need to look dirty like you just got off the job site. You were just down in a hole digging dirt or something. Like, you can still look clean and put together. But if you're wearing some of the equipment, and everybody knows that you're not going to be wearing every single piece of equipment, depending on the situation and everything, because you're the CEO, you're probably not there on the job site and whatnot. But showing that you're wearing some of it, being concerned with the person, like you said, we want to make sure that you go home tonight. That's why we're concerned about safety, rather than, hey, our safety numbers are a little down. We want to make sure that we get our safety up because corporate is making sure that safety numbers are. We want them at 99% or whatever your metric is there. Yeah, metrics are great, but those guys out in the field, they don't care about that. So speak to them where they're at, what they care about, which would be, I want to get home to my family. So how do I get home to my family safely? By wearing my PPE, by wearing this protection gear and everything. And so really going to them and being with them where they're at, relating with them is the first thing. The second thing would be realize that, well, really kind of same thing. You realize you're there for them. And when you're focused on yourself, that's when a lot of those nerves happen. And as long as you do have nerves, is a good thing, because that means you care. But what's debilitating is when we allow our own self and what people think about us to keep us down, because most people are concerned with themselves. They don't really care about you. So focus on the people that you're speaking to, and that will help you get past those nerves. But then it will also help you be able to communicate to them and with them. They'll be bought into what you're saying because they're going to realize that you're there for them. You're speaking with them rather than at them, or you're speaking to them for their benefit rather than just at them, so you can hear yourself speak, because you love to hear yourself speak. So I would say just start focusing in on your audience would be the first thing there. And then as far as like this, the bigger groups, to me, it does seem kind of weird, but when you're with a bigger group, less people can focus on you, or there's one person focusing on you, but you can't tell who all is paying attention and who isn't. So in my mind, as the audience gets bigger, it gets actually a little bit easier to speak with them. But this is the crucial part for you, is that you need to focus in on the one person that you want to talk to. So going back to our safety topic, rather than just trying to be generic about safety, let's go in and it can even be about like, hey, don't you want to get home with your kids tonight? Well, it's really important for us to wear our PPE, because otherwise you may not be able to get back home to your kids tonight. And you could bring up a story or something like that, but really talking into that person that has kids that they want to go home to, that's going to get them bought in. And when you start to get buy-in from them, yes, you're excluding the people that don't have kids, but because you've bought in this person that has the kids, they're probably going to be seeing other people, and they're more familiar with their coworkers, and they can even say like, hey, make sure you put your hard hat on, man. Want to see you here tomorrow. Would hate to not see you here because you decide not to wear your hard hat. Or, I'd hate to see that you only have one eye now because you decided not to wear your safety glasses. So, I mean, just talk about that. Try and share stories. Be relatable with them.
Relatable, yeah.
Yeah, but don't sit here and use these stupid metrics. That's one thing that nobody wants to hear. And you as the manager don't even care to hear that. I guarantee that you hate to hear the board members talk about metrics when it comes to how you're running your business. So, I get it. You need the metrics so you can know whether you need to improve on something, if you're doing good, if you're doing bad. But if that's how you're going to go motivate people, you're not motivating anybody by doing that. So just be real with them and have that conversation, and make it more of a conversation than you just talking down to them and telling them what to do.
Sure. I think the other thing that goes a long way, and it goes along with communication, but is accountability,
Mm.
and taking accountability. A lot of very good bosses and CEOs will do that. They'll stand up to the team and say, "Hey, listen, I'm part of why our numbers are down, or I goofed up, or I made a bad decision. I had to push you there." But then on the other hand, a lot of people refuse to do that. They will always put the blame on the employees not working hard enough, or not moving fast enough, or not making the right decision. So I think accountability, along with properly conveying your message, does go a long way when something does come up, or things happen. Because if you don't do that, how are the people that are working for you ever going to come to you and say, "Hey, boss, I goofed up. I smashed the dozer into Bob's car. He parked it in the wrong spot." I've seen all sorts of stuff happen. But a lot of times it's like, "Oh no, we don't know what happened. We have no idea." There's 10 people here and somebody did something, but nobody wants to speak up to it. So I think that's a big deal too.
Yeah. Yeah. And allowing people to make mess ups. I mean, because we all mess up, like you said, but if it's as soon as somebody makes a mess up, like you're cutting them off, they're fired, all this stuff, you're going to get that environment that nobody wants to say anything because they're afraid they're going to be on the chopping block next, that they're going to get called out in front of all their coworkers and get embarrassed and everything. So having grace with your staff is such an important thing that I think doesn't happen enough. And this isn't just in the blue collar world, even in the white collar world, the corporate world, this happens all the time. And we want to try and make things black and white, but we're humans. Not nothing is black and white. I mean, there are certain things that are black and white, but pretty much everything is not black and white when it comes to humans. Like, there's a lot of gray area. There's a lot of things that we need to know the whole situation there and everything before we make that decision.
Absolutely. So one of your offerings is obviously teaching people to become better speakers. You have different packages and different ways of doing it. So what would you say to, give some advice to a new boss, a new business owner out there? He's a couple years into the game. He's got 30, 40 employees now, and he's just having a hard time getting his message across. Maybe he feels like he's not getting the respect, or he's just not getting people to really pay attention to him. What are some of the high level things, or even the basic fundamentals that you teach people to be heard and get their message across to their staff?
Focus on the outcome that you want. It's similar to going to a destination with your GPS. You put in your phone. You don't just decide that looks good on the map. I'll just go there and then try and follow it. No, you're putting in this is the exact address of where I want to go on my phone. And so my phone tells me exactly how to get to that specific address, or like your job site. You have to know where that job site's at, because you can just say, "Hey, let's go to a job site."
Just
All right,
any
well, which
job site.
one? Yeah. And this is the problem that we have as speakers, especially beginner speakers, or especially as you're starting to get a bigger team, is that you're just like, "Hey, let's go to the job site." Dude, we've got 30 job sites. Which one are you talking about? So the more specific and more pointed you can get to a certain thing or a certain topic, the better. Because now when you went into the conversation, into the meeting, and we'll go back to safety again. If I'm just saying, "Hey, let's talk about safety today." What part of safety? Okay, we really want to talk about making sure that we're wearing our PPE. And we're going to talk about safety and talk about PPE today. What's the proper PPE that we're going to wear? And you can dive right into that. Now everybody knows what it is that you're going to talk about, and if you've reached the outcome that you wanted with that conversation. So maybe it's not the safety topic. Maybe it's you want to congratulate somebody or talk about the job site and what's going on there. But you can then say, but within this job, I want to talk about the good things that have been going on. And so now in your mind, you've framed yourself to say, my outcome is to discuss the job site and the good things that have happened. And there's probably be other things that come up that you want to talk about, but you can make sure you're navigating your way to talking about those good things that happen on the job site. So the biggest thing that I see, and where I would say to start at when you're getting into speaking in front of groups, is knowing what you want to leave them with. What thing did you want to talk about and leave them with? Because I've been there. I've been to meetings where I want to talk about one thing, and then all of a sudden we're off in this rabbit hole. They've made some joke, everybody's laughing and going back and forth. But then I can bring them back because hey, okay, I get it. Haha, funny. Like, let's get back on track. We were going to talk today about the good things going on the project right now, good things going on the job site. And you can bring everybody back because you know your direction, much like the GPS. When you get off route, it'll recorrect you and get you back on route. And so I would say start there. Know exactly what that outcome is with that speech that you want to give.
That's good advice. That's good advice. So for the people like me personally, I'm not like passionate about speaking. It's just not something that I am. I get up and do it when I have to because I have to, but there's some people that really want to get better. They really like have the desire to do that. What are some of the things that like you really drill down on and break out when you're doing like a one-on-one setting to get somebody maybe to overcome some of the fears that they have?
So we talked through a lot of like the mental breakdown of what's going on. Like, why are you afraid of speaking in front of that group? And a lot of times it ends up being that I'm afraid of not looking good, or I'm sounding wrong, or saying the wrong thing, or how people are going to perceive me, what they're going to think about me. And it's all about me. So I have to really help change that mental framework to say, well, it's not about you. You're not going up there to speak for you. If you're going up there to speak for you, it's much like the commission breath on a salesperson. They're there trying to sell the person, and therefore they never sell them because they're worried about the commission. That's all they care about. They don't care if they're about the person and if they get the right car or the right product or service. They just want the commission that they get from selling. And so the same thing for you with speaking. When you're focused on you, you're going to be more nervous because it's all about you, and your speech is not going to be as good because it's about me and what I get versus me pouring into you and giving you the information that you need and you want, and focused on you. So I really focused in on that mindset and helped shift that, so that way they stop focusing on themselves and start focusing on their audience. And then from there, we get a structure, which starts with the thing we just talked about. What is the outcome that you want from this? What are the results when you're done with the speech? What do you want to happen from this speech? Do you want them to be bought into the new safety initiative? Do you want them to understand the update on the job site, what's happening, what's going to be happening next? Like, what is that outcome that you want to have from that? And that doesn't, I mean, it could be the status update. It could be them doing something new. It could just be an informational session. So making sure that you're going to cover a whole bunch of things, but the most important thing is this one thing. And so making sure that they do understand that at the end. And then we go through and structure out what that speech looks like. So it may just be, we've got a couple of main points that we want to talk about, share some stories with that, get some buy-in, get some feedback throughout it. And then we conclude by wrapping up what we talked about, and then kind of give them that send away, that takeaway with, hey, here's the one thing, like, if you didn't listen to me at all, here's the thing that we want you to have. So really go through and fix the mindset, and then build a structure for them so they can take that into their next speech that they're working on, but then any speech after that as well.
Cool. That's good advice. So of all the people that you've been working with so far, like, we're not talking like specific people, but just like in general, like some of the successes, that you've had coaching people, in training people, like just like a generic example, this person wouldn't stand up and talk in front of their dog, but now they're standing up in front of a football stadium. I think it's a hard thing, like for me, to try to realize, like, I don't want to stand up in front of 50 people. If I ever had to stand up in front of like a stadium full of 50,000 people, I would probably just like walk off and run away. But like any like success stories that you've had with some clients that show that these methods are proven and they work.
Yeah, I've had one here recently. We were talking through one of her interviews that she was doing, and she's just like, I just feel like I just don't know what to talk about. And watching how she interviewed, I could tell, like, in her mind, she's like, well, I want to talk about this and this and this and this. And there's all these things she wants to talk about. But then she kind of basically doesn't talk about anything, but talks about everything at the same time. And so we really helped go into her mindset to realize that she just wanted to sound intelligent and she wanted to sound competent with what she was going to talk about. But because she was so focused on trying to be competent and say the right thing and not say the wrong thing, that actually held her back. And so, really, just giving her that structure. So, kind of what we talked about here, let's focus in on one thing. Let's talk about that. And then, especially with interviews, so like a podcast like this, if you're going down this one direction, if the host doesn't necessarily want you going down that direction, they'll ask you a question in a different way, but decide and make a decision on talking about one thing instead of talking about, real estate and the job site and sales and marketing, and then never really talking about anything specific because we can't pull any information out of that. Another one, this actually happened today. We were talking through it, and at the beginning of the call, she's like, "Oh my gosh, I've got 3 speeches coming up in the next couple of months, and I went from nothing to 3, and I just don't know what I'm going to do." And I'm like, "All right, let's sit down. What you're talking to me about? What's that overall objective that you want? All right, this is your theme. Now, let's talk through. What are some points?" She's like, I'm not sure what I'll talk about within it, I'm like, "Okay, what are the points?" And then, okay, cool. What are some stories that we can share within each of these points? And at the end of the 25-minute call, she was like, "Oh my gosh, like I feel so much better now. I feel like I have structure. I have a way forward and everything." And so those are two of the ways that I've been able to help out with getting that mindset, but then also helping with that structure and giving direction. Because when it comes to our speaking, our communication, it's about giving direction, being very clear and concise on what it is that we're talking about. Because when we talk in generalities, when we just kind of go around in circles and we're never clear on that outcome, clear on that message, the message gets lost. And so that's kind of what I did with those people. And then one other one, it was actually I helped 5 startups in the energy space, the Department of Energy funding rounds, and 3 of the 5 actually it was basically the same thing. Like they had a lot of their information, they knew what they were going to talk about, they were sharing it, but what they didn't share at the end was what they would do with that money. They didn't give that strategy or that vision to go forward. And 2 of them, I'll say, like I helped out a good bit, but one, she was all over the place, or her team was all over the place. And I was like, "Look, you're not giving me any emotion here. I feel like you're just kind of going through this just through the motions. And then I don't know where this money, like if I give you this money, which they were all competing to get $250,000 of funding. And I'm like, you're telling me what you've done and what you're currently doing, but you're not telling me the future of this." And so that's another piece that's usually missing there for any speaker is we don't share the vision of what it looks like after our speech. And if you do the things that I tell you to do within this speech, what you can look like afterwards. So let's go back to speaking. So if I tell you, if you do XYZ to get better at speaking, here's what your life will look like when you're on that other side. You'll be more confident. You'll speak with clarity. You'll be a better leader, things like that. But if I don't ever paint that vision for you, it's difficult for you to want to take that action and to understand why taking that action is so important and what it'll benefit you for. So to kind of wrap all of that up, really the mindset, the strategy and direction of what a speech is, and then painting that vision are some of the things that I can help with and the important things that you need to do as a speaker to communicate better and more effectively.
Cool. Great advice. So right now, so you are working in your full-time job with BMW and you're doing this as a side gig, but you have your goal is to make this your full-time job. Tell me a little bit about your goals and your vision for speaking sessions going forward the next, 5-year timeline.
So for sure, within the next 5 years, plan on being out of the business. Within the next 1 to 2 years, more specifically, is when I plan to be in this full time. So out of the 9 to 5 into this full time. So right now, I'm throwing virtual events, getting people in, getting them some exposure to be able to speak. Really working on solidifying some more digital courses. I have a couple right now. I want to get some more kind of going more into business communications rather than just the speech prep and everything like that. So having these different offers to help with different aspects of speaking is something that I'm looking at doing. I'm working on a book right now. So I made that commitment in a podcast earlier this week about making the commitment to writing my book on public speaking and communication. So that will be coming out in the next probably 3 months. So I just need to get on it and need to create a date for that. And then getting on more stages. So putting more people on stages as well as getting myself on more stages. But I see having probably a team about 5 coaches under me within the next 5 years, having probably about 20 people on staff overall, whether it be admins, virtual assistants, video editors, content editors, stuff like that. But really want to grow this team to really go out and impact at least 10,000 people directly.
Awesome. I think it's hard as a business owner sometimes to you're always like tackling so much. You're dealing with the employees, the job sites, the administrative stuff. I think the last thing that you ever in the blue collar business, probably a lot of people would agree, the last thing you would think about is a speaking coach or somebody to help you with your communication. But if you think about it, it's it could be one of the most important aspects of your business is if you don't feel you're doing a good job communicating or relaying to your team or standing up in front and talking to them, if you don't take action to do something about it, you're always going to be kind of stuck in that rut. So I think, for the people listening, that I think a lot of what we've talked about, resonates, and just the positive change that you can make by taking that leap and going out and talking to somebody like yourself. It could do wonders for a lot of people, I'm sure.
Yeah. And every problem I've ever had, if I had to boil it down to one thing, whether it be my corporate life, personal life, business life, you name it, any portion of my life, it has always come down to a failure to communicate properly in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Absolutely. So why don't you tell our listeners how they can get a hold of Philip Sessions?
So best way, you can go to my website, speakingsessions.com. You can also find me on Facebook at The Real Philip Sessions. That's Philip with 1 L, or over on LinkedIn at Philip Sessions. So linkedin.com/in/Philip Sessions.
Awesome. And you're willing to help a newbie or somebody that's, been in business or CEO of 20 years that just wants a little bit of assistance. You're there, kind of helping in all directions.
Yeah, I can help. Yeah, anybody, whether they're brand new or they're seasoned and they just want to get a little bit better.
Awesome. Well, hey man, I appreciate you jumping on today. Glad to have you on. A little bit different take on communicating and handling your team here. So it was really great to have you on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This was a lot of fun.
Good deal. All right, we'll be talking to you soon, and one of these days I'm going to take you up on your offer to teach me how to speak in front of people, because I think that's coming here in the next couple of years. I'm going to do it one of these days. All right, man, you have a great day. It's great seeing you.
Yeah, you too.
Take care.